Let's begin.
Okay, so for this tutorial, I'm going to show you guys some tricks with the reverb. For the first one, we're going to do sidechaining the reverb to the dry signal. It's a very common trick, it's very useful. So we're going to add a reverb, we're going to group it, and we're going to put it on a separate chain from the dry signal. So one will be 100% reverb, and one will be dry. Now our melody sounds like this. Now here I've created a sidechain key that follows the rhythm of the melody. Now we are going to add a compressor to the reverb channel that will be sidechained by the click that we created. So it will duck the reverb every time the pluck hits. And this is great because you're still getting the reverb, but it's getting out of the way of your pluck every time it hits. Now another interesting thing that you can do is to actually put the compressor before the reverb. If you notice with a plucky instrument like this, you wind up with a lot of unpleasant smacks in the reverb, which aren't tonal. Take a listen. Now, check out what happens when we put the compressor before the reverb. This way, the sidechain key is actually going to get rid of the transient of the pluck before it hits the reverb. Notice how we got rid of that crash sound that happens at the beginning of each pluck. Here it is without the compressor. It sounds like footsteps in a hall or something, and now with it, it sounds tonal. Now, oftentimes with reverb, you wind up with the reverb of one chord extending on over the next one. And so tonally, you've got a little bit of a mess. So I'm going to show you how you can keep things clean. I'll be using my song Mandala with Marnik. So, because of how quick this chord progression is, you're oftentimes hearing the reverb of a chord coupled with the reverb of the previous chord. So how do we fix that? Well, we're going to create an audio effect rack. We're going to put a new reverb on. It's going to be called Reverb Switch. And we're going to automate the on and off switch on that reverb very quickly at the beginning of every single note. This is going to cause the reverb to restart. So for each chord, you are only going to be hearing the reverb of that chord. So here, for instance, you are getting the A minor reverb without any of the E minor reverb that came before it. As opposed to normal reverb. So it's a little bit less blurry, and if I solo them, you can really hear the difference. Here's with the effect. And here's the regular version. Now, if you notice here on the reverb chain, I also have a utility, and that is just muting it every time the reverb turns off. Because if it didn't, then you would get a dry signal on top of your dry signal, which would create a click, which sounds like this. Which sucks, you don't want that. So, moral of the story, this is a great way to keep the reverb faithful to the tone of your chords. Now another great use of reverb is to put it in reverse to glue the notes of your melody together. The first thing that we're going to do is record the audio of this super saw pluck. Now we're going to cut out the sections that we want to go in reverse. So this chord I think will go into this chord, this one will go into this one, and so forth. It's pretty much the same section every time for symmetry. Just want this guy, that guy, that guy. Now we're going to reverse them all. We're going to add a fade, and listen to the movement that this adds. Here's before. Now this is another variation of reverse reverb, slightly more sophisticated. It's a great trick, classic trick for introducing a new instrument and especially a new vocal. We're going to be using my song Wildcard.
I come around the turn and people stop and stare.
We're going to take this first line here that she sings.
I come around the turn and
We're going to drag it to a new track. We're going to consolidate it and we're going to reverse it. We're going to add a reverb. We're going to give it a little decay, going to make it all the way wet. We're going to take off any attenuation to the highs, any effects. Now we're going to freeze that, which means print it with the reverb. Reverse it once more so it's back to playing forward, playing normally. Now take a listen.
I come around the turn and people stop and stare.
Now to mix it in a little bit better, we're going to add some reverb to it. We'll add some ping pong delay so that it fades out naturally.
I come around the turn and people stop and stare. I'll make a killing from this chain.
Voila, that is reverse reverb.
I come around the turn and people stop and stare.
Another trick is to give an instrument in the lower register some higher tones by duplicating it on a track that is entirely reverb and putting that an octave up. So we're going to start with the lower instrument, the cello. Now we pitch it up, 12 semitones. Which sounds bad, but the reverb is going to blur that. Now we're going to do the Haas effect, which separates the left and the right side by a few milliseconds. It's going to make it very wide and out of the way of the original cello. Then we're going to use this EQ to get out the lows. Now we can even add another octave, so 2 octaves up, 24 semitones, and the reverb is going to blur it so much that you don't really notice the loss in quality. Now I'm going to show you guys how I employed some of these tricks on one of my actual songs. This is Strangelands. So let's take a look at the reverb channel. Before it gets to the reverb, I have FabFilter cutting off the lows so that it gets a cleaner signal. The reverb that I'm using is for a hollow room. I got a pretty short decay time, 1.8 seconds. The high cut's really not doing anything, it's letting in all those high frequencies. Here on the reverb itself, we have a very fast off and on switch, so that's making every note clean. It's getting a clean reverb. Next we have an EQ. This is really just taming the high frequencies that supersaws have so much of, but I'd rather do it here in the EQ rather than totally filter them out with the reverb. Now here we have a utility that's just muting the beginning of each note when the reverb turns off because we don't want to double up on the dry signal. The other interesting thing that the volume automation is doing is it's rising in the gaps in the melody. And what that does is it takes the reverb of the last note and it fills the space by swelling into the next bar. Now the next thing that we have is the ozone imager, which is being used to spread the upper mids and the highs very far out so you get a very wide reverb. Now the next thing that we have is a compressor, and this is being used to duck the reverb down whenever the melody plays. It's being sidechained to this instrument. So our end result is this. And when we sidechain it and play it with the rest of the track, so, in summation, we have an EQ giving a cleaner signal to the reverb. The reverb is turning off and on to give each note its own reverb. It's being EQ'd a little more to tame down the highs. We have this utility that's creating that tension in between the melody gaps. We have the ozone, which is widening everything. And we have the compressor, which is ducking down the reverb whenever the melody plays. So guys, I think that's just about everything I know about reverb. Good luck to you. I'll see you next time.